Hey, I'm Randy Younger, New York City's go to film enthusiast. Every week, I dive deep into the world of cinema with special guests from the New York City film scene. Whether I'm interviewing industry insiders or comparing the latest releases, there's always something for every movie lover. Join me as I explore the magic of film and discover what makes these movies unforgettable. Hey guys, I'm Randy Younger, and it's a special edition of Under the Radar, bringing movies and people together one frame at a time. And with me right now, I have a wonderful filmmaker, Matthew Bissonnette, of the new surreal dramedy Death of a Ladies' Man. Matthew, welcome to the show.
Good to be here. Thanks for taking the time.
Of course, thank you for taking the time. And the film is wonderful. It's beautiful. It's sad. It's just a lot. And I really enjoyed it. It's very unique in terms of tone and message. And I just wanted to, start off, how did the film originally come about?
I sort of started thinking about the film. I was a single dad at the time, and my folks split up when I was a kid. So I was thinking a lot about, fathers and sons, that relationship, how things sort of repeat, and how you might kind of not get around them, but just think about them in a different kind of way, and sort of maybe have a different kind of perspective on, family histories as they move through. I'm very interested in filmmaking in relationships between families, brothers and sisters, brothers, all that kind of thing. It's sort of like the foundational relationship that I think people are kind of thinking about in their life. Sort of thinking, what's an interesting story to kind of tell about that? So that's kind of how it started. And then also, I'm a big Leonard Cohen fan,
Mhm.
and a lot of the things that he's sort of concerned with in his songs and his writing seem to kind of mesh with some of the things that I was thinking about at the time. Like, there's that Cohen quote, it's Father's Day and everybody's wounded. So I kind of, I was thinking about that. So and how to do that in a kind of interesting, entertaining, and kind of a visual, cinematic type of way.
Indeed, indeed. And it is, like I said, a very unique style that you've established here. Was the final tone, was that what you originally envisioned, or did it kind of evolve over the course of the film?
No, that's kind of how I envisioned it. I've done a number of movies, and kind of what I'm always kind of interested in. There's always some sort of conflict or difficult thing that's happened in all the films I've made. But what I'm always doing is, I think, approaching it in a kind of light or a more hopeful type of tone. I kind of like that. I That's kind of my experience of life. Life is difficult, but better if have a kind of hopeful view on it. And also, if something's sad and then you just shovel more sad on top of it, I just don't find that as interesting. So I kind of want contrast to exist in the film in a number of kind of ways, because I think, life is a paradox, or, different things are always existing at the same time. So you
Right.
don't want too much of the same thing happening in a movie, in my kind of opinion. So yeah, that's sort of the approach that I've kind of took on this film, and generally in the films, that I'm kind of making. So yeah, that's intentional.
Yeah. Like there's a lot of gray area in this film, as there is in real life. So I think you established I just can't get over the tone. It really is just a wonderful um, balance here. So that's really great.
Yeah, I'm glad you. And I think, the thing that I was lucky about is the group of actors that we got together
Mhm.
understood that. I think one
Mhm.
of the hardest things in a movie, or sort of any endeavor you do with other people, is communicating to them what you think the overall thing is like. And
Right.
it was just sort of really, I think, lucky that they're kind of very, hardworking and sort of sensitive actors, and they were kind of able to understand from the page what we were trying to do.
And speaking of actors, this is a wonderful cast, I must say. I was impressed with, some of the new faces,
Hmm.
and of course, Gabriel Byrne, who I've been following his career for decades now, probably. And I just want to know, what was it like assembling this great cast, and what was it like working with them?
Gabriel was the first person that came on, and I think we met about 2 or 3 years before we shot the film. We met in New York and had lunch, and ended up talking for 2 or 3 hours. about life in general, a little, quite a bit about the movie, but about a whole bunch of other things, basically that a lot of the things that the film sort of touched on, addiction, the difference between reality and fantasy, relationships between sons and fathers, stuff that we sort of had in common. And it was just a great conversation. And then when he came on, and the other actors, were sort of easier not to get, but people sort of came to understand, the kind of movie we were trying to put together, and that sort of opened the door. And most of the everyone in the film I had seen in movies. Like I'm sort of I love cinema. I watch a lot of films, and when you're watching them, you sort of remember, a remarkable performance. And I had seen Caval in something, and Antoine obviously in Mommy, and then Brie and I always thought was great, and Jessica. So those are pretty much the only people we asked to be in it. We
Okay.
got very lucky. They sort of said, they understood the script, and we were just sort of, lucky enough that the people we went to, wanted to do it. So again,
Hmm.
I've been lucky in my career to work with really good actors, and that it just sort of continued on this film.
Right. And the actors definitely carry this film, as does the screenplay and, of course, the cinematography. So the elements are really, they're all great pieces that really come together nicely here. And I'm curious, how important is collaboration to you on a film set?
I mean, that's sort of the beauty of cinema is, like, writing is obviously a very solitary thing. You write something, you give it to some people, they have a look and give you some ideas. One of the great things about movie making, and that I kind of feel so lucky to be a filmmaker, is, you sit in your garage for a year or so, you get the screenplay, and then it gets bigger and bigger. You bring on producers, then you bring on casting directors, then you bring on your production designer. And all those people care about that aspect of the movie and understand it better than you do. And, and to sort of just be blessed to kind of work with people that bring that kind of passion. It's always like so shocking to me and so wonderful. You show up and they have thought for hours and hours and hours on what the book cover should be like, where you just wrote book cover. And they sort of bring in ideas and just a level of care that you're not capable of. And I
Right.
think that starts with performances. The actors have thought about it, at least in my experience. I've been lucky, just so deeply. And they, the character that Gabriel had,
Mm.
he showed up with that. We
Okay.
had talked to, a couple of times in the year or two as we kind of got the financing together, but it was never me going like, oh, I think he's like this and he's like that and like that. He showed up with an idea of how he would look,
Mm.
how he would carry himself. He executed that with the costume, the designer who was wonderful. And again, my kind of job is to, get out of the way, make sure that everyone's in the same movie, but just
Mm.
let them kind of do their thing. And that yeah. So I guess that's the long answer is that cinema actually is collaboration, and that's sort of as an art form fairly unique. And I
Mm.
think it's one of the beautiful things about movies is if you think about it, it's sort of why we should watch them all together.
Mhm.
They're made by people all together, and I think they're sort of designed in their most pure way to be experienced all together in that dark room. I think they really are a community art form. So
Yeah.
that's there.
It definitely is it's a teamwork effort, but even though it is a team, everybody brings something new to a table. So it's very individualistic too, as well as a group dynamic, which I totally agree with you on that one. So that's wonderful. So now the film, you mentioned, fathers and sons, the family relationships. How close to reality was this film to you? Was this based on actual events, or were there pieces of your life that you included in the script?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think as I mentioned, my folks split up when I was a kid, and I became closer with my dad, but he wasn't really around when I grew up. And then I ended up getting divorced and being a single dad when my son was fairly young. So in that essence, it's sort of, based on things that I understand. And I think, when you're telling a story, I think what you're trying to do is, what's been my experience in life? What sort of things have I experienced? And then what's a story that kind of fits with them that I can sort of include or sort of you know, encapsulate those experiences in a narrative. So then you're sort of thinking of a story, and the story just sort of starts to come to you bit by bit. So that was sort of the grounding experience. It's not really based on things that happened so much in my life, but these foundational experiences. So how can I kind of convey that feeling or that sort of sense of things in a story? So that's sort of the genesis of it. And then, you have these, things start to happen narratively, and they sort of says, oh, this feels right. That kind of seems like it's going to get that feeling across. So that's kind of how it came about. So, again, it's kind of like characters. When you think of a character, you're sort of maybe thinking of someone you may have met, someone you sort of remember, and you want to imbue that kind of specific sense into the people. And then I think stories in a certain kind of way are a little more universal. And then so how can I take these specific pieces, the specific thing I've experienced, these specific person I may have met or known, and then put them in a larger, universal kind of archetypy type of situation, and let that kind of play out.
Hmm, interesting. Good answer. Um, Now, I know that you filmed in Montreal and Ireland. What was it like working with those in those two locations, and how similar or how different were they from one another?
Yeah, I'm from Montreal, so it's always nice to go home and shoot there. I shot two movies there, I think. So that's always one, it's great to be home. And I know the city, so I kind of know where I want things to happen, as opposed to, I have shot in other cities and you have to kind of, go figure it out a little bit, which is also intriguing in its own kind of way. And the Montreal crews are so great. So, shooting there is always kind of, a real, it's just a great experience. Particularly like a movie like this, we shot this film in 22 days. So you need to move quickly. So, and then the same is true with the Irish crews. The Irish crews are amazing. So they're like top-notch sort of professionals. Sort of funny thing about it is that, Montreal also is like heavily Catholic, and also obviously people speak French there. We shot on the west coast of Ireland, which Ireland heavily Catholic, and on the west coast a lot of people speak Irish. So it was sort of these sort of interesting that they're kind of similar places in a kind of way that I
Right.
sort of knew a little bit, but when we went and do the movies, it really kind of brought home to me. And I'm kind of Irish descent also, and so it was an interesting experience to sort of see how closely these two places mirrored each other.
I'm sure there were challenges during the shoot, whether it be in Canada or Ireland. What were some of the main challenges? What were some of the obstacles that you had to overcome for this film?
I think it's sort of always the same when you're making a movie, is there's never enough time.
Hmm.
So I think, like I said, we shot this in 22 or 23 days. It should have been, pick a number 35, 40. But, film is also a commercial medium, and there are sort of physical, monetary realities that you come up against. So that was sort of the biggest challenge. And then also, this is the first film that I come from indie movies, and this is the first film where we had a lot of sort of in camera and also special effects. And that is challenging to execute because it takes a certain amount of time. So just to sort of prepare properly and then have the time to kind of execute those was the biggest challenge. Like I said, I was lucky enough that all the actors brought their A game. If it had been a situation where we showed up and people were sort of like, "Can we talk about this for a couple of hours?" We would have been dead. So they had done the prep work, and we were just like, "Okay, bring in the tiger lady. Let's do this. Keep moving." Yeah, but it's also fun. Like we do a lot of the things in camera. I'm a big believer in camera effects. So it's also, though it's challenging, it's fun to be there and have all those things actually happen live on set. It makes for an interesting afternoon.
Keeps you on your toes, I'm sure.
It does. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, keeps you nervous.
Yeah, yeah. And now I don't want to give much away in terms of plot, but you mentioned the Tiger Lady, there's Frankenstein in there. Uh what was it like kind of just bringing these aspects of the film story to life? How close did you work with like the special effects team? Because I know there's a few effects shots in the film. What was it like working with that crew?
Yeah, I mean that we did a lot of prep because again, if you don't have a lot of time, what you do have on the front end is time to prepare, properly when it's only two or three people talking. So we went over them, again and again, planned them out, and just tried to execute them, in the best way we could. And in terms of the effects, the thing that we were really trying to do is, the film it deals with addiction. It also sort of deals with the difference, between fantasy, a fantasy life and reality, or how you think things might be, or a vision you have of yourself and the one that exists in real life. And that's sort of an internal conversation.
Mm.
And the thing about cinema is that it's not that great for internal conversations. That's sort of more, for a novel. So
Mm.
with the hallucinations, we were looking at like how can we make this, visual? How can we, externalize this and kind of do it in an interesting way for people, but sort of show the struggle that the character might be having between, what he thinks is happening in life and what is actually happening in life. So that was
Yeah.
sort of one of the things we talked about when we were doing the effects, and why it was sort of important for us to do the majority of them in camera, and even the ones that we did outside of camera, we wanted them to seem sort of as kind of as realistic and simple as possible, if that makes sense. We wanted the effects to kind of be really engaging, but also to feel like, oh yeah, that could really happen. That was happening. That happened on the day, is what we wanted to kind of
Mhm.
convey.
And it definitely looked really good on screen, I must say.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Did you have a favorite scene to film?
Just because it was so fun to shoot, there's the hockey scene,
Hmm.
just to be in the rink, and we shot that at quite a big rink, and sort of have the sound system going, and all those guys are all, very, very skilled figure skaters, and the woman who choreographed it sort of works with the Canadian Olympic team. So to sort of see them do that, and also I played hockey when I was a kid, so I was on the ice prepping with them, and
Right.
that was just sort of I hadn't done that before. And that was very fun. It was just a very, very fun. I mean, it was very, very stressful because we had one day to shoot that, so we
Mhm.
were moving pretty fast. But it was a lot of fun just to have that big a set of toys at your disposal.
Yeah, it was the beautiful scene. One of the more memorable scenes, I'd say, very dreamlike and just very beautifully shot. So yeah, okay. Um, Definitely see how that would be your favorite. Uh, I'm curious. You have a very unique style about you, very visual. Are there any filmmakers that have influenced your craft heavily?
A lot. I mean, there's, I really like Hitchcock.
Yeah.
There's Ozu I'm a big fan of. I really and that sort of classic stuff. But I came up at a certain time, I guess, in sort of like the late 80s, early 90s. So like
Mhm.
Spike Lee was really, really big for me, Jarmusch, Linklater, those kinds of guys.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think, you try and develop your own kind of thing. And then a lot of the sort of things that I'm interested in, I try and pull from outside of cinema to a certain extent, like a certain photographer like that you like Jeff Wall, for example, or
Mhm.
like the Cohen stuff. So you're sort of, again, wanting to bring, I think the great thing about cinema, the same way it's collaborative with people, is it's collaborative with interests. So there's obviously, like, I went to film school. I love movies, but you're also wanting to bring in other parts of things you're interested in,
Mhm.
because film allows for that. It allows for photography, it allows for, music to be kind of used in different and new ways. So I think, when I'm making a movie, I'm trying to say, well, can I bring in the kind of music I like
Mhm.
to a film, and how's that going to work cinematically? So that's sort of an example, and then that's something I'm always trying to do. Like, music is an art form that I really feel strongly about and really love, and
Right.
like, can you make it work in a cinematic way?
We just have a few minutes left, but I am a huge film score nerd,
Mhm.
and I'm curious. You just mentioned how important music is to you. Are there any composers that you'd like to work with in the future that you haven't already?
Not really. And it's interesting. The guys that I have tended to work with do score things, but usually come from like a band or a kind of different background a little bit. So I guess
Okay.
I played in a band when I was a kid,
Mhm.
and the one thing that I always respond to in scores is some score that has a very distinctive melodic through line or sense to it. And that's
Okay.
kind of what I really love in, like, say, Third Man, that kind of stuff, like that very sort of distinct,
Mhm.
um, idiosyncratic. I think someone once said, the best film score is one you don't notice, and I don't subscribe to that. I
Right.
kind of feel like the best film score is one you notice. I
Right.
like it when it has a really strong personality. So, and I think sometimes you get that with people that have come up writing songs
Okay.
because what they tend to usually be really, really good at is
Mhm.
melody. And
Right.
I love a score that has a sort of overarching melodic continuation. So
Okay.
that's that's kind of where I my bent on scores.
I hear you. No, I need a good, powerful theme.
Yeah,
Thing,
exactly.
you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
it's
Yeah, but
and it
Star
shouldn't,
Wars,
yeah,
Star Wars is
it
Star Wars because to a large extent of that theme song.
yeah. And if Jerry Goldsmith were still alive, I could totally see you working with him.
Yeah,
Uh,
me too.
uh, so I'm just curious, we have to wrap up in just a few seconds here. Are there any other films or projects you're working on now that you can discuss?
There's two, and I won't get too into one is sort of a lower, I guess lower, a more reasonable budget crime story that I'm
Okay.
interested in doing, and the other is a fairly large budget drama. So I
Cool.
predict the crime one will get done first,
Mhm.
but I'm looking forward to doing both of them. They're kind of in the works right now. So
Okay, sounds
yeah,
good. Well, maybe
yeah,
we can discuss that at a later date.
I would love to. I really
Yeah.
appreciate you taking the time, and I've enjoyed the conversation. So thanks so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you. Likewise, sir. Likewise. So, Death of a Ladies Man will be available on VOD on September 26th. So, check that out. Matthew Bissonnette, thank you so much for your time today. This was incredible. The film is wonderful, and you're wonderful. Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much. Have a good day.
You too. So, guys, I'm Randy Unger. This has been Under the Radar, bringing movies and people together one frame at a time. We'll see you next time. Take care.